Thanks for staying up later. We're looking forward to these two shows coming up now with Carl Reiner, whose movie Sibling Rivalry with Kirstie Alley is in the theaters right now. And we'll talk about that in the second program. But let's focus on the television side of Carl Reiner here, because it's pretty obvious that you're involved with two of the most enduring shows in television history. Your show of shows with Sid Caesar and Imogene Coca, and later, the Dick Van Dyke Show. Let's start with that one. What makes the Dick Van Dyke Show different and groundbreaking in sitcom history?
Well, you know, I didn't know it was groundbreaking when I did it. My wife, in her infinite wisdom, when I was offered a lot of television pilots to read and to contemplate doing, she said, "You can write better than this." I had never written one. "You don't have a hair in front of your eye, do you?" "I do." "There it is. Thank goodness." And I was riding down the west side, no, the east side drive, the Franklin Delano Roosevelt Drive. I remember the moment it happened. And I said, what can I write about? What the heck do I know that's different than anything? What piece of ground do I stand on that nobody else does? And I said, wait, I was an actor on the show of shows. And I was really an actor without a writer's portfolio, but I was in the writing sessions and wrote with them. I says, that's a subject that I know about. I lived it for 9 years. So I wrote The Home Life, because that's where we lived. The home life was where we worked for 8 hours a day, but we went home and talked about it with our wives. They said, enough already. I realized that that's rife for material.
There may have been others, but if it wasn't a first, it was certainly rare that the Dick Van Dyke Show was a show that was set in the office at least as much as in the Petrie household. We didn't know what Ozzie really did in Ozzie and Harry. We didn't know what Ward Cleaver's job was, or Robert Young as Jim Anderson. Maybe they were insurance men. I think that was sort of hinted at, but you never saw where they worked, and it didn't matter.
No, as a matter of fact, I didn't know I was doing that. It was only after I did, smart people like you noticed, and somebody wrote an article, and they said he broke ground. I said, I broke ground. Didn't know I was breaking ground. I was just doing. That's why things work. You do it really from the gut, and then if you do it right, somebody will examine it and say what you did right. I was breaking ground, and while I was breaking that ground, I remember the first show, somebody said, show business, nobody is interested in show business. One of the heads of CBS said, and he said, why can't you make them insurance people so people will know that? I said, well, as far as I know, insurance people don't tell jokes during the day. I said, don't you see what we got here?
You know, I was going to sell a guy term, but then he bought whole life.
Yeah, right. Oh. And then they would, well, insurance people would collect jokes, too. They would tell, but we wouldn't have a Maury Amsterdam or a Rose Marie or a Dick Van Dyke. I said, we're doing a premise. We always set up the premise with jokes. While we're telling the premise, we've got people spritzing with jokes. I said, isn't that a better way? We called Dick Van Dyke Rob, after my son Rob. I named it after my son Rob. And nobody was named Rob in those days. Robert is my son, and we called him Robbie. We liked the name Robbie. And there were so many Robs born during that period that Rob Petrie was, when he was the king of television.
Van Dyke, though, had been in 10 or 12 failed pilots, so he wasn't surefire, right?
This was the 13th pilot. I think he made 12 pilots before. Everybody knew he was talented. That's why they kept throwing pilots at him, but they had to find what he did best. And what he did best is play a real guy. He is the most gifted natural actor I've ever met in my whole life. He's one of these ambidextrous people. You put a script in one hand, and you can put anything, like we're reading the script for the first time, and there's any business, drinking a cup of, he could do it with the other hand, reading it for the first time.
And he always tried to work in things where he could be physical.
Oh, yeah. His manager would come and say, we got to do something physical this way. We got to find ideas. He goes into the bedroom, and we cut for a commercial, and she comes out of the bedroom a second later, because it's continuous action. Is she going to go in and change her clothes to satisfy? Well, maybe if it's continuous action, she can wear the same clothes. Then we had to have her wear a dress if it was not continuous action. And I never forget this note from Procter & Gamble, I forget, or the agency, who Grant Tinker was a member of then, but he used to look like this and say, what can I do? He said, this note came, watch her undercupping. I says, what is her undercupping? She's wearing a dress that is very tight, and it illustrates the curve of her behind. We call that undercupping. I never heard the word. You knew the word, undercupping?
I'm just trying to be agreeable.
Yeah. Well, has anybody in the world heard the word undercupping? And they said, watch for her I kept that on my wall. I said, I'm too busy today. I'm watching for undercupping. I'm going to be spending the whole afternoon watching for undercupping.
I'm going to start using it, though.
Yeah.
I'm going to see a girl walking, you know, several paces ahead and say, check the undercupping on this babe.
Yes. Anyway, we had to check her undercupping, and we told her. We told Mary, you're undercupping. We didn't do anything about it. We said, that's ridiculous, and they didn't fight us on it.
Yeah, she was another one who wasn't necessarily tabbed as surefire. You might have seen it. Some of the others might have seen it when she walked into the office to audition. But she'd been knocking around show business for a while.
The day she came to audition for us, I had already seen literally 60 different people. And I went to Sheldon Leonard, our executive producer. I said, I don't know what I'm looking for. He says, you will when you see it. And we went in to see Danny Thomas. Of course, we flew a girl in from New York, paid $500 to test somebody, or just to read them. And she wasn't quite right, and we had to go report to the money man, Danny Thomas. Danny, we just spent $500 and find a girl. And he said, who is that girl who read for the part of my daughter, but she had the wrong nose in my family, went this way instead of this way? 3 names. She got legs. I said, we found out it was Mary Tyler Moore. And she wasn't going to come in. Her agent called her, said, he want to come for a reading? She says, no. She was very depressed that day. She said, no, I don't want to go in. She came in and read 3 lines, maybe 2. And I went across the room. She was sitting in a chair, and I grabbed the top of her head like a cantaloupe. And I says, come with me. And she got scared. She thought it was one of these producers who's going to do that thing, you know.
Yeah.
And I took her by the head. I said, come with me. And then she knew I was kidding. She's come, and I took her to Sheldon Leonard's office. This is the girl. And she had a ping in her voice, which I've used that before, the word ping. I've never heard that sound before.
You promised you'd marry me. Where were you?
That's what I want to explain.
I've never been so humiliated in my whole life, Robert. Everybody was here. Even my Aunt Mildred was here. She came all the way from Ohio.
Oh, honey, please. I hate to see you cry like this.
Well, it's the only way I know how to cry.
The reason it worked, I think, is because it's one man's reality. There were no... You ever watch the crawls today on television shows? There's 2 writers, usually a team of writers,
right.
Then there's a team of executive producers, then there's story editors, and there's story supervisors, story editors, and supervising the editors, and there's about 9 names. But there's 9 sensibilities there. Usually it filters through one. But in this case, it was me. I was doing what I thought was my life.
Somebody said once that one of the differences, and other shows now since are like this, but one of the reasons why the Van Dyke Show at the time was pretty close to unique was that people didn't act in some extravagant slapstick way. They behaved.
Yes.
And there was lots of laughs that came out of their behavior and their honest characterizations, but they weren't in these weird sitcom situations where somebody's toe gets stuck in the bathtub faucet or someone's hanging upside down from the Chrysler building.
No.
They were just these people that you came to know, and their character was amusing.
It's interesting. I'll answer 2 parts of that because, one, I agree with what you're saying. Somebody asked me, what's the shot of the mirror? And there was a lot of lines coming for her. He said, well, get a towel. I don't have a towel. There's a washcloth. He says, do the best you can. And she says, how come there's no camera in the bathroom? I said, because I want America to imagine you nude. I said, if we had a camera, they'll see what we show them. This way, they see you with a washcloth, and they'll fantasize the way most men will undress women. I said, here, we've undressed them for you. And she understood it, but she felt that she wasn't in the show enough. And she got very petulant and upset, and she dogged the first run-through rehearsal. And I never yelled at anybody, hardly anybody. 1 or 2 actors in my life. Mary, there's no reason to yell at her. I screamed at her. I said, how could you do this to me? I'm looking at the show. I have to make changes. She was so upset, and I apologized. She said, I can't come back on the set. I said, look, she's because you never yell, and you yelled at me. Everybody think I must be a monster. I apologized to her, and I said, everything I said, I should have said quietly in your dressing room. But she gave up smoking, and she had nerve ends, raw nerve ends. She sent me a beautiful brass thing, which I have mounted in the house of a faucet, you know, with a plaque on it.
You played Alan Brady, who was the host of the show that these people were writing for. But for the first 2 or 3 years, I don't think we ever saw you. And then eventually it was a big deal when people saw Alan Brady.
Well, when I cast that part, I said, I can't cast anybody big enough. I want them to think of Phil Silvers, Bob Hope, Sid Caesar, Jackie Gleason. And I said, nobody big enough. They're going to say, who? So I said, I'll play the part, but I'm not that big. I always felt myself as a second banana. I said, so I played him under a towel with my hand in front of my face with a telephone. And then about the second year, I used to do one out of every 13. I was busy writing, so I couldn't come down to act very often. But when the scripts got complicated, I said, it's not fair to the script or the author not to turn this guy around when they got very complicated. Then I loved it. I loved it when Alan Brady had a big part.
I always thought it was good that Brady, as played by you, didn't appear to be especially talented. No. So that these talented people yes. had to sweat and slave to make this preening lout look good.
I know. Everybody asked, was it based on anybody I know? Really nobody, because all of the guys, the top bananas, were incredible. Phil Silvers there's nobody been like Phil Silvers, who behaved, acted like him on stage. Sid Caesar was like the flame that all the moths clung to. Jackie Gleason, incredible. But there was there were performers on early television who had shows, and they named them after them, and they disappeared very quickly. And I said, well, it makes more fun to have a hard-nosed guy there.
With Dick Van Dyke, and after the first run went off in the mid-'60s, there was such a clamor for it that you came back with the new Dick Van Dyke Show in the early '70s. Different situation.
Yeah, well, what happened is Dick sort of half-retired and moved to Carefree, Arizona. He lived in a place called Cave Creek. And lo and behold, about 2 miles down the road, they built the Southwest Studios, a tremendous studio for movies or whatever, a really first-rate, state-of-the-art studio in that time, 1970. And somebody said to Dick, wouldn't you like to do another show? You can go fall out of bed and do it right in that studio. And it's in the middle of the wilderness, the middle of the desert, but people would come in from Carefree, Scottsdale, Phoenix to see it as the audience members. And somebody told me it was being done, and it was like 1970, this 1965 was the end of the show, and I said, I really worried that he would get something that wouldn't fit his talent. So when they asked me to do the pilot, I said, please, I want to.
There was some episode, and this is now early 70s, right? 72, 73, somewhere in there. There's one episode where you wanted to get a little bit further toward the edge, and they wouldn't let you.
I think I'm still a little angry about it. Could you tell it from my demeanor? Just a little pissed off about it. The third year, we're going along swimmingly. We're in the top 10 for most of the year. Never fell below 15, but the whole year's going well. And I used to tell everybody that a lot of television situation comedy, you try hard to come up with something new, but you can't, so you do whatever you can. But once in a while, an inspiration hits somebody, and you do a show that's never been done before. What happens when a child walks in on his parents while they're making love? It was done, finished, and they said, we're not airing it. One guy, who was a nice guy, his argument, I remember screaming on the phone. I said, what is the argument? He said, well, he says, we don't want to talk about that. I said, what? He says that they went to bed and just had sex. I says, well, that's what they did. That's what people do. In this particular episode, Dick came home from being on the road with a show, and he came and surprised his wife, still in his lieutenant's outfit from the Civil War outfit. They made love, they made fun, they made lovely, and you didn't see any of the moment. It's a little moment where the kid walks into the bedroom. And I said, but that's the truth. He said, no, but we can't tell the people that you have sex for other reasons than to have children. I said, why? Isn't that true? You always have the possibility. I said, they had it because they were in love. Anyway, that was the argument. And Dick and I and all of us said, if that doesn't go on the air, we shouldn't be in this business. It went on the air in Canada, not here, and all of us got out that year. I said, that's
because of that. That was the straw.
More or less. We were in the top 10, top 15, and we all said, if we're going to have this kind of, I think, Dick, I said I wouldn't, and Dick said neither would I, so there it was.
All right, so what we're about to see, a little clip of the show, has been seen in Canada, but it never aired in the United States.
Never had been seen any place in the United States, and hasn't been seen since 1973 any place.
Tomorrow night, Carl Reiner will be back in the same clothes, and we'll talk about...
Set. I'm sorry, you don't mind if I wear the same thing?
You have to.
Okay, good.
You have no choice.
Okay.
You'd be surprised how fast tomorrow's going to come in this case. 2,000-year-old man your show of shows, All of Me, Dead Men Don't Wear Plaids, Sibling Rivalry, the movie that's out now that he directed with Kirstie Alley. So we hope you'll have a chance to join us tomorrow night. Until then, see you later.